Hey, what's going on there, folks? Welcome back here to another update, and welcome back here to a Friday, start of the weekend, February 23rd, 2024. It's about 10:32 a.m. here in the California area. Latest activity here on the Earthquake 3D globe looks like a 1.4 in California. We did see some movement last night following all that X-flare activity. 6.3 earthquake striking out there in the southeast Pacific Ocean. Going to jump into space weather activity first, where we're still seeing some flaring going on there from that ginormous sunspot area. I do want to cover real quick what they believe. This is somewhat the official word here regarding yesterday's cell outage. This is from the Washington Post. AT&T says massive cell outage was caused by a technical error, not a cyber attack. So basically, this article is stating that AT&T's cell phone service was interrupted yesterday due to some type of application and execution of an incorrect process that was used as they were expanding the network. So I find this a little odd because, when we were looking at the down detector yesterday, it showed numerous cell phone companies having issues. Well, they're stating right here that it may, those other cell phone companies may have just been calling AT&T numbers, and that's why they had reported Verizon and T-Mobile and other cell phone companies. I didn't lose service here yesterday. I have T-Mobile, so I'm not for sure, if this was just strictly according to this article, they're stating that it was strictly related to AT&T, and people started to call and report that their Verizon service was interrupted because they may have been calling an AT&T number, thinking that Verizon was down or T-Mobile was down, but it wasn't, according to this article. See, customers from several other carriers, including Verizon and T-Mobile, reported a smaller number of outages. Representatives of those companies said their networks were not affected, and that reported outages may have come from people who tried to call AT&T customers. Cricket Wireless, a budget carrier owned by AT&T, had more than 12,000 reported outages at one point. So maybe it's not that big of a deal. I seen a lot of stuff going on yesterday in terms of various cell phone networks, so this sounds a little fishy. But either way, that's the official word here, that it was due to an application and execution of an incorrect process that was used there at AT&T that created that wide network there, affecting, they have about 71 million postpaid wireless customers, so that's how many people were affected. That's a lot of people. All right, so if you happen to have a cell phone other than AT&T, let me know in the comments if your cell phone service was affected. Say you have Verizon and you couldn't call anybody, you had no cell phone service, then let me know. I'm kind of curious. I want to see if this is it almost sounds kind of like a cover up in a way, but we'll get to it. We'll keep an eye on it. Let's jump back into space activity here real quick. Now, the latest, let me make sure I got the latest here. If you notice, this is the solar flare detection chart here. Kevin put out a little update regarding this. If you notice that large X flare that was here yesterday, largest one of this cycle, missing from the data. Well, when that large X flare came in, they had some technical issues. I think it was because it was so strong. So it's actually missing here from this data. You have to click on the original link here that goes to the Space Weather Prediction Center, and there you can see that very large X flare. Kept track of it here, but it's missing off of a couple different graphs. That was an X6.3, the strongest solar cycle, or the strongest flare in this solar cycle here, so that's pretty decent. Unfortunately, if you look at all three of these events right here, and they were, pretty decent X flares. Now, a lot of times, flares will produce an explosion or an eruptive event that shoots off billions of tons of energetic particles, and it's a coronal mass ejection is what it's called, and that right there is what we have to watch out for. That can have a major effect on power grids and whatnot. None of these flares have produced any CMEs. If they did, they were very minor. So we're waiting. Even though that was one of the strongest, the strongest flare of the solar cycle, and strongest one I've seen in quite a while, that was it. It had its little 5 minutes of fame, and it's not really going to do anything else. It didn't do anything else. Create a little bit of radio blackout on the sunlit side of the Earth, not in relation to the cell phone outage there. It had no effect. That's not related. This flaring activity is not related to the cell phone outage there yesterday. It affects the 3 to 30 MHz zone, which is like ham radio, CB radio, stuff like that. Cell phone operations operate way up in the ultra high frequency that does not get affected. And we've definitely seen some strong flares here before, and I don't think that that's related at all to it, because we've never seen any issues with it. And that activity actually occurred, the cell phone issue occurred prior to that big one. We've seen these other X flares, and a lot of people were putting out some false information that those X flares are related to the cell phone outage, but I don't see it. It doesn't make sense that it would. That's my official statement on it. Now, looking at the activity right now, this is the last few hours here. We're starting to stair step back into the M flare category, as you've seen here on the UV filter array. Let's bring this back up. This is that sunspot region that produced the last 3 X flares, and of course the strongest X flare of the solar cycle. It looks as though it wants to produce another X flare. It is, again, stair-stepping in a way that, got to bring this one up, that would lead me to believe that we're going to see a soon, immediate X flare popping off there once again. So the sunspot region does need watch pretty closely. It is looking fairly dynamic. Let me pull up the most recent image here. Getting a lot of complexity going on here within this massive sunspot area. And if you notice the position here, it's almost directly lined up here with the Earth looking directly at us. So if anything were to blast off here in terms of CME activity, we could see quite the show. A lot of people get the confusion mixed up there between flares and CMEs. Flares do not produce auroras. It's the subsequent ejected activity, the ejected material that hits the Earth days later that produces that effect on the magnetic field. Let me spit it out there properly. And then we see the aurora activity, right? So flaring, definitely not, it's obviously a little effect on Earth in terms of certain radio communications, but it's that ejected material that arrives days later that we have to watch out for. And that's how we get the auroras from that CME activity. Right now, it hasn't happened. If it does happen, it will almost certainly be Earth directed, and we could be in could see quite a show in terms of the auroras if we see that happen here soon. Gotta make sure it happens while it's directly facing Earth. This sunspot here, fairly dynamic. I wanted to pull up the largest recorded sunspots here, at least here in history. And back in 2003, we seen a decent, obviously decent, right? X40 flare from 40, I think it was 0486. That was back in the solar maximum. And a couple other, obviously a lot more stronger flares than what we've seen yesterday here. And it's ultimately the CME activity that arrives days later that affects power grids and whatnot, or can affect power grids. But as you can see here, let me see if I can bring this up. Where'd my, I gotta bring that back down there, right? 10486, so 0486 was the culprit of numerous flares back in 2003. Look at this. It started off here with some M flaring, and then seen some X flare activity, and then ultimately it ramped up to some stronger flaring, right? X7.77, X11, X14, X24, X40. So this sunspot that we're seeing right now is kind of looking like that. It has produced quite a few flares here in the decent category. Look at this. A couple M flares. Started off with the X1.9, X1.7, and just kind of getting stronger. X6.3 yesterday. And again, it's currently still flaring. It looks like it really wants to pop off some more activity here today. So could be looking at maybe something matching yesterday's event or larger. It's always a possibility. And again, it is facing the Earth. It is growing in complexity. And man, it is a massive sunspot region. And you could probably see this sunspot with a pair of solar eclipse glasses. You have to make sure you got those solar eclipse glasses there so you can look at the sun. Don't try to do it without them. Or if you have some type of solar lens for your camera, that would be quite the visible spot there on the sun, easily visible, and that's probably what it would look like. Beautiful. Notice quite a bit of complexity going on here within the core. Again, we do have a high, decent threat there of seeing some further flaring. X flare has been elevated to 30% chance. Obviously, right? We've seen 3 X flares literally within a 24-hour period right here, guys. That is quite impressive. This one, obviously it's missing. But if you go back here again, there's that reading. It's right after that M flare. As soon as that X flare kicked in, it did something to the data to where it's not showing up on some of the graphs. But that was an incredible strong flare, again, of the solar cycle. And they can get bigger. But, so yeah, 30% chance for X flare. C flare, 99% chance. M flare, around 60% chance or so. And we'll continue to watch this. Again, about ready to produce, looks like maybe some stronger flaring here right now. All right, and that's really about it in terms of other sunspots here. We do have a couple out here, it looks like on the eastern limb, that not quite impressive. Obviously, the showstopper is going to be this one up here. It's quite complex, so we'll keep an eye on that. Right now, again, as I mentioned, not a whole lot of auroras in the forecast because we have not seen any CMEs being blasted off from either of these X flares. Yesterday, we did see a 6.3 earthquake occur just a short time after that large X flare event out in the southern East Pacific Rise. Been kind of keeping a track here of the theory that space weather activity is related to elevated earthquake movement and large earthquake activity. Well, I guess we can kind of mark this one up as one for the theory. 6.3. I mean, it had been fairly quiet days prior, and then as soon as we get this X flare activity, we start seeing elevated movement. So that's one more in the books here for space weather activity and a relationship between the two, plate tectonics and the effects here on Earth of space weather. Looking over here across the Kuril Kamchatka, we've seen a couple earthquakes there from yesterday. It looks like the Kuril Islands, 5.1 and a 4.7 there as well. This area definitely primed for some larger scale movement. It's been a while since they've seen any megaquake activity, and it's definitely primed, I feel. Down here across the Tonga Trench, a couple earthquakes there from yesterday. Looks a lot quieter out here today compared to yesterday, where we did see that elevated movement following those X flares. Over here across the Java Trench, looks like we're trying to make a little migration here across northward towards the Andaman Sea. A little bit of movement stair-stepping here across the trench. The latest one in this area shows a 4.5. Further into the Afghanistan, up northwest of there to Afghanistan, a couple 4s there from yesterday. One more earthquake this morning. Looks like over here across the area on the China side here of that border. Little earthquake over here across Italy as well. 4.6 coming in into this little region. Now let's see what we got here on the earthquake 3D globe. See if anything major is going on today. There's really not a whole lot of newer rings here on the globe. The newer rings would of course be white in color, and there's not a whole lot. There's a whole lot of red and kind of pinkish color here, indicating the older movement from yesterday. There's that 4.4 here. over on the northwestern side of the Philippine plate. This one's got to be deep. Well, wow. I thought this one was going to be a deep one. Normally we'll see a lot of deeper activity out here, but this is fairly shallow, 4.4. Here's the deeper quake from yesterday. Just off the coast here of Japan, 379 kilometers deep. Let's check out California, see what's going on out here across the west coast in terms of earthquake movement. Really not a whole lot of elevated activity. We have seen a lot of rain. And, here's another scenario that we're, kind of monitoring here in terms of the relationship between weather, rainfall, and earthquake activity. We've had a decent amount of rain. Not a whole lot of earthquake activity out here in the last couple days. It does take a little time for some of those that accumulated precipitation and rainfall amounts to seep down into some of the faults. We do have quite a bit of surface faulting, so and technically you would think that some of these faults that are locked would start showing some further movement here with all the rainfall we've seen. So just kind of keeping an eye here on Southern California in relationship to that potential of rainfall accumulation there. Lots of it in relation to maybe earthquake uptick. Not a whole lot of earthquake activity here today. A couple smaller microquakes. Little clustering going on here just off the San Andreas Fault. But really, if you look at the big picture here, it just looks like a typical day out here around California in terms of earthquake movement. Over here around Mount St. Helens, Pacific Northwest, a couple quakes there from yesterday. Looking out across the rest of the states here, New Mexico area, seeing a little bit of a shaker there last night, early in the morning, 1 o'clock local time here, my time, 4.0. Coming in here, along with a 2.8 in the area. Quite a few oil fields out here around this area. Let me see what we got. Closer inspection. Satellite view. Oh yeah, looks like there's quite a bit of them. Look at this wastewater disposal ponds here, and that's out here in the New Mexico area. You guys see that? Quite a bit. All these. Look at these little checkered boxes out here. Wastewater disposal ponds. So yeah, looks like we're getting hit fairly decent around the area with some earthquakes in the oil fields. That'll continue, no doubt, in the future, and they can get big out there in terms of magnitudes. A whole bunch going on down there across this area of Texas, where there's a whole bunch of oil fields out there across Pecos, Texas, as well. Down here, this area has seen a little bit of swarming here over the last 30 days. This is just the last 24 hours, but they did see some decent activity here in the last, let me pull up the last 30 days or so, show you guys. There's all the movement. 74 earthquakes out there. Of course, the largest one going to be that 4.7 out there in the oil fields of Texas. Quite a few oil fields out here. Got to back out to see all those little checkered boxes, but upon closer inspection there, a lot of these are some holding tanks, and again, all these little pads here holding some similar holding tanks as well. So continue to watch that. It's just going to be a common thing here as we head into the future. One earthquake way out in Kentucky from yesterday, a little 2.1, really nothing big going on there for now. Across the Puerto Rico area, looks like a typical movement out there in the Puerto Rico region. This area always seeing some earthquake activity. It's in between the Marirotos Trough here and the Puerto Rico Trench. Getting the squeeze going on here. Always seeing earthquake activity. Very dynamic region, but yeah, a lot of earthquake activity stirring up there. In the South America region here, let's see what we got. Mostly smaller quakes out here today. There's a cluster going on there, but really no major movement for now. The 6.3 earthquake out here following the X-flare activity should have amplified the conditions out here across South America. That 6.3 occurring out along the divergent zones here between the Pacific and the Nazca Plate boundary. It's going to be right about here. Looks like it's on that triple point area where the Antarctica region is as well. So technically we should see some elevated movement out here across South America. Maybe we have a little bit in the deeper regions there with those newer rings. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. Alaska looks like a 4.5 up there coming in right now to the area of Alaska. See what we got. Let's go up north. 4.5 coming in there. Chase, Alaska, well north of Anchorage here, about 54 kilometers deep. Looks like they have been seeing a little bit of smaller earthquake activity out here in the last 24 hours. Aside from that, general small microquake activity out there. So we'll keep an eye on things today here, see what happens. I do think we're going to see some further activity there across the sun in terms of flaring activity. So there's our M flare kicking up right now. Again, it looks like it does want to produce some further X flare activity. We're getting that stair-stepping ladder event here, and that's kind of when things start to go pop. So we'll watch for some further X flaring from that sunspot. Again, as I mentioned earlier, it is in a position here where any, like CME were to take off, eject here from the area, it would be almost certainly geo effective and probably provide us with a decent aurora show there in the days ahead. So we'll continue to watch this sunspot area. It does have a couple days here before it looks like maybe this time tomorrow this should be directly facing the Earth. But either way, a CME blast off, even in this position, we would get hit pretty good. So we'll continue to watch that. Storm Prediction Center out here in terms of severe weather, not a whole lot. A little thunderstorm activity out there across the southeast. Aside from that, the weather models out here. Let's see what we got. Put this into motion here. This is the GFS run showing potential weather patterns out here. I'm kind of keeping an eye on the west coast. That storm system that's supposed to hit us here around the 27th is kind of backing off, not quite looking as strong as what it was originally forecasted. But either way, it's going to be some colder air coming down to the west and a little bit of moisture there for Southern California, but not quite that dynamic setup that was originally forecasted. In fact, let's see, it looks like maybe our next decent storm will come in around the 1st or 2nd of March out here along the west coast. A lot of rain coming into the southeast there. Another storm after that, I believe, for the west coast. So we're getting into that time of year where these storm systems can definitely stir up severe weather potential out here across this area of the country right here. We'll have to keep an eye on it. But the extended forecast there, right now, they're still showing some severe weather potential here on day 5 and day 6 out there across these areas in the yellow. 15% chance for some severe weather here issued by the Storm Prediction Center. Again, that's day 5, day 6. That's a ways out. We'll check that as we get a little bit closer to that date. Seismograph stations there look fairly quiet for now. Not a whole lot of earthquake activity out here. A little spike on Mount St. Helens there. But aside from that, things look fairly calm. We'll continue to watch the space weather activity today. And, of course, report back on anything that takes place. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button. Also, click that notification bell. That way you guys can get notified when we do go live and provide important updates out here in terms of severe weather, space weather, volcanic activity, earthquakes, you name it. All Earth-related here on this channel. We'll catch you guys back out here a little bit later tonight. Take care, folks. Enjoy your Friday.